Breaking news out of Ferguson this morning. Two police officers, were apparently injured on the job from gunshots. I'm going to go over to Reuters and read the report here. According to Reuters, two police officers were shot during a protest outside of course, Ferguson Police Headquarters early on Thursday. That would be today. St. Louis County Police Chief John Belmar told reporters that a 41-year-old officer from his department was struck in the shoulder, and a 32-year-old officer from a nearby Webster Groves Police Department was hit in the face around midnight as the crowd, of course, was starting to break up. And he continued. Now, Police John Belmar, of course, had some ideas of why they were shot. He said, quote, "These police officers were standing there and they were just shot just because they were police officers. I have said all along that we cannot sustain this forever without problems." Now, for the most part, even though there's been some flare-ups, some clashes between protesters and police, for the most part, they've tried to keep it pretty peaceful. They've tried. And, there's, like I said, there's been some clashes between police officers and protesters. And when you roll in there with militarized police, what do you expect? You're going to get some clashes. But this is the first time that police officers have been shot, to my knowledge. So, I mean, that's obviously a disastrous turn of events, of course. Nobody wants, as far as I know, I don't want violence. I think I hope for the recovery of the two officers and all that. So now, the officers that are not identified at this point, according to Chief John Belmar, were both conscious and are being treated at a local hospital. So they are alive. Their condition is described as serious but stable. Now, what exactly happened? Well, several dozen protesters had gathered in front of the Ferguson department Wednesday night, and they were, doing their thing. They were doing protests. And I go back to Reuters for this. The demonstration started peacefully, but about 24 officers clad in riot gear later faced off with the protesters, and 2 people were taken into custody. So already you can see a little bit of an escalation by the police, riot gear, arresting some people, etc. Now, around midnight, it was reported that gunshots were heard, about 4, and of course, when that happened, a lot of the protesters began to scatter. According to a Reuters photographer, he said they started screaming, and one shouted, "They hit a cop." Of course, the cops responded by getting defensive positions, but right now nobody has been apprehended. They're not sure who did it or where it came from. Now, Police Chief John Belmar seems pretty convinced that it was somebody embedded into the protesters, saying that the shooter, quote, I don't know who did the shooting, to be honest with you, but somehow they were embedded in that group of folks. Now, protesters, of course, disagree with that and said, according to DeRay McKesson, who was one of the protesters, tweeted out, "The shooter was not with the protesters. The shooter was on top of a hill." Now, there was a hill about 500 feet away from the officers, and they were away from the protesters as well. So, according to protesters, they said, well, that shot didn't come from us. It came from behind us. We fled. We don't know what happened. We, obviously are calling against that kind of violence. And actually, there was a quote earlier, I forgot to get it, of course, of where a different protester had said, "Hey, look, we don't like the idea of people doing violence against the police just as much as we don't like the police doing violence against us." And I think that's pretty much sums up what most people think. So, like I said, it's an unfortunate situation. Hopefully this does not lead to another sort of crackdown when it comes to the area in Ferguson and the protests and everything. Everybody should be allowed to protest peacefully, obviously. And so, I mean, it's not a good situation, but it never really has been that good of a situation.